Hello, my name is Mike, and this is a bike. In fact, this particular bike, well, it was featured in the last 4 videos that I made about resurrecting bikes. Now, if you recall in our last video, well, it looked pretty good. It's all put back together, but it just didn't run real good. It seemed to be running awfully rich. We're dealing with a bike that supposedly has oversized cylinders put on it, and it's got an aftermarket fuel controller tied in between the sensors and the factory computer. So we're going to drill down in and see if we can't figure out why it's running so rich. So stick around, we'll try to get it running right.
Somewhere in a dusty, dirty back alley in western Arizona is an old fart trying to cram a square peg into a round hole. He'll work on anything, just as long as it's got at least 2 cool wheels.
According to the manual, if I take a measurement from pin 14 to pin 29, I look right down here, well, pin 29 to 14, when the throttle's closed, I should see 1130 ohms. When it's open, I should see somewhere between 3.7 to 5K ohms. So let's see what we get. I've already got my pins in location. Okay, throttle is closed. Oh, I'm in the wrong scale. 1130. Alright, and I verified that my pins are in the right location. I got nothing. Let's try wide open throttle, see if that... So, here's the problem. Either I have a bad TPS, or the aftermarket controller, since the key is off, the aftermarket controller is shut off, and it is someplace between the factory PLC ECM connector down here and our TP sensor. In order for that system to work, it has to get someplace between the ECM and the various sensors on the bike. So my guess is that that controller is blocking the signal that I would normally be able to read at this connector. So really, before I can go any further, I think I have to remove that. I'm going to remove the aftermarket controller, and let's just see if that doesn't make a difference. Now you may ask why I'm looking at the TP sensor. Well, first of all, I already measured the temperature sensors the other day, and they all checked good. The reason I'm going after the TP sensor, which is located, my finger's in the way, right there, connects to the end of the throttle body, and I've got it unplugged. Here's the plug. TP sensors were a pretty common problem on these bikes. The control system on these bikes is hypersensitive to minute changes in the TP sensor. It doesn't take but a couple of ohms resistance to change the way the engine runs. So it's very, very common to replace the TP sensors on these. So that's kind of why I'm looking in that general area. I thought maybe I can get up under here with my meter and probe into that connector, but I really can't. I can't really get to it. And I don't happen to have this particular plug. It's a 3-pin kind of triangular shaped plug. I don't happen to have that one in my can of spare Victory wire harness plugs. So really the only way I can take an accurate measurement on that TP sensor is to remove the tank, remove the controller system, plug the original wire harness back into that TP sensor, and then just come back over to my ECM connector like I did a minute ago and measure the correct resistance there. Okay, I'm allowed to change my mind. Once I got in here, I realized that the connector for my throttle position sensor connected directly to the factory harness. So this aftermarket fuel controller does not look at the TP signal and basically makes its changes in fuel at the injector side, on the output side, rather than the input side. So So now that I'm taking a measurement, I'm seeing 1.8. Spec is supposed to be 11 something. Now, if I go to wide open throttle, it should be 3.5 to 4 ohms. So I have to go to a different scale. Okay, I'm going to go to wide open throttle. And I'm not seeing it. Should be 3.5 to 4 ohms. Oop, my probe came out. That's why. Try it again. Problem is these probes are kind of fat. Sorry. God dang it. 19, 20, 21, 6, 7, 8. Well, anyway, if I can keep my probes in place just long enough to demonstrate, I keep wanting to fall out of place. They're little bugger-sized holes, so they're not easy to get in there. I don't want to cram them in there too hard, because then you end up damaging the pins, and then when you put the computer back in, you don't have good contact. So it's kind of tricky. I just simply need to grow a third hand. Well, one of you guys out there, let me borrow your hand. Put your hand on that for me, will you? Thank you. Appreciate that. So as I roll the throttle, that number should go down. And we see it actually goes up. And as I'm rotating the throttle, it keeps going up instead of down. I'm about halfway through the throttle and now it's beeping. So that tells me we have a bad throttle position sensor. It's erratic, it's all over the place. It should be a nice smooth transition from 1130 ohms down to about 5 ohms. So we're going to go ahead and put a throttle position sensor in it. As I said, they're pretty common issue with these. And I believe I have a good one. So you can see our throttle position sensor attached to the end of the throttle shaft. It's held in place by true 2-hex Allen head screws. They're kind of an all-ball size. They are a 2.5 millimeter. And be careful when you're cutting them loose because, well, those fasteners are held in by Loctite. So you may have to work them a little bit. You may have to even heat them. But usually you can get them loose and get it replaced. And again, when you go to put it back together, you probably want to put a drop of Loctite on it as well. Anyway, I'm getting in my own way here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to remove these with the Allen. We're going to put the new one in, tighten them down, put it all back together. Well, before I put it back together, I'm going to come back over here and take more measurements just to verify that the new sensor is giving the readings that are specified for in the manual. All right, now the new TP sensor is installed. If I put my meter on it, well, it's not quite the specs in the book, but it's much closer. Right now it's showing about 2K. It's supposed to be between 11 and 15. But however, this time, even though it's a tiny bit high, if I rotate the throttle, you can see it increase up till it reaches 5K like the spec called out for. So that actually goes up to 6. So it's a little on the high side. But if it still doesn't run right, maybe we can loosen the screws and adjust it slightly. I've had to do that in the past. And because there's really not much adjustment on it per se. And then there is a procedure in the book that you can actually teach the computer what the throttle positions are. There's something called the TP Learn sequence. So we'll try that as well. I tried that before, but of course with a bad TP sensor, well, you can't teach the ECM something from a sensor that's not working properly. So put the tank back on it and see what happens. Here we go. Let's see how she rolls. Give it a little juice. Let's fire it up. It runs awful. And it's running richer than crap still. Alright, I removed the fuel controller from the injector system, and I put all these stock original injector wires back connected the way they were supposed to be. Let's put it back together and see how she runs now. Alrighty, here we go again. Key on. Contact. Well, it's running better than it did. Not seeing as much smoke come out. Still smells a little rich, but then again, the engine's cold, so see what happens as it warms up. But I think we've made a difference. And we're a little low on fuel. Boy, that sounds a lot better. Now, another thing I did was to pull the plugs out because, well, if it's been running rich, they're going to get fouled out. And let me get these in the light here. Look how just coked and choked these bad boys are with soot from running so damn rich. So I've got a little spark plug cleaner, little outpowered gizmo here on the wall. It's basically a little bead blaster. We'll get those plugs cleaned up too. It should help it run better. Alrighty, here we go. Bead mode, and go. Air mode. Bead mode. Now, look how much better these are than what they were. You can actually see the ceramic now. I'll put it back in, how she runs. Now, one of the other things I had hoped to address in this video was the rear shock. Very, very common problem on these bikes. I think everyone, with maybe one exception that I bought, has needed a rear shock. They're made by Fox. They can be rebuilt if you can find a rebuilder. You can find them used online. If you find them used online, well, they generally don't last too long. And if you'll notice, as I bounce this bike, it just bounces and bounces. There's no dampening taking place. So it's down here underneath the seat. You kind of have to support it because, you know, once you get it, if you're sitting it on the ground, the wheels are going to want to come forward. So take this plate out, the shock comes out, and you can put a new one in. Now, something I discovered that'll save you cheapskates like me a little bit of money is, well, with very, very minor modification, you can use a rear shock from a Suzuki GSXR 600. It turns out it's the same dimensions, basically the same spring rate, same basic dampening is the same. The only thing you got to do is where the front goes onto this swivel here, you got to spread it out just slightly. You can put it in a vise and just give it a little tweak. And then when you connect it at the back, you got to slip a little washer in there to take up some play. So I'm not going to do it on this video because I've got to order one. It's going to take a while to get here. But as you can see back here, I got a bolt going all the way through, and I've got a swivel joint here. And on the GSXR, you just got to slip a washer in there, take up some of the play. And on the front, you got two ears that the bolt goes through, and the GSXR will fit in there. You just got to spread those out just a tiny bit, maybe a millimeter or two. And that's easy enough to do. And then that GSXR shock will fit right in there. And so far, a couple of my bikes have had them on there for years, And they seem to hold up better for some reason than the Fox shocks do. Well, there it is. Rescued from the weeds in front of a guy's house after it sat for 8 years. Took a little time, took a little finesse. We had to chase a few things down, but now she runs beautiful. She's ready to hit the road. As time goes on, I'll probably work on it a little here, a little there, and improve it some more. Got some saddlebags I want to put on it. I want to put that rear shock on it. The wheels are pretty badly pitted. If I can find nicer wheels for it, I'll do that as well. And I'll add her to the fleet. Thanks for watching. Be sure to come back for the next revival that I do. I'll be working on a couple of other odds and ends things here and there in between. But I always got my eyeballs peeled for that good deal because I am a cheapskate. If I can buy a bike cheap, I'll get it. See you next time. Don't forget to subscribe.